Hey, Rembrandt, try to stay inside the lines. We're training warriors here, not art students. The condescending voice of the SEAL instructor boomed across the asphalt, sharp and serrated. The crowd of trainees, lean and hungry in their fatigues, offered a chorus of nervous chuckles, the sound echoing off the freshly painted barracks wall. The woman, the target of the ridicule, gave no reaction. Her focus remained absolute, a study in quiet competence as her brush moved with a slow, deliberate grace, laying a perfect line of beige paint along the doorframe. But across the training ground, observing the entire exchange from the shaded balcony of the command building, Admiral Hayes leaned forward, his eyes not on the instructor or his students, but on the woman. He saw the methodical calm, the economy of her movement, the profound silence she wore like armor. And then he saw it, a flash of dark ink on her wrist as she turned to dip her brush. He froze. If you believe respect is earned, not demanded, type earn below. This scene wasn't just another day at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado. It was a crucible, a place where egos were forged and broken against the unforgiving anvil of elite standards. The sun beat down, turning the air into a shimmering haze. But the woman seemed to exist in her own pocket of cool, professional calm, her world narrowed to the task at hand, entirely immune to the casual cruelty of the man posturing before his class. The instructor, Chief Petty Officer Thorne, was a monument to his own perceived greatness. He was built like a piling, with a voice that had been sandblasted by years of shouting orders over engine roar and gunfire. To him, the woman was an obstacle, a civilian nuisance in his sacred space of warrior-making. He saw a painter, nothing more. He saw soft hands, a nondescript jumpsuit, and an infuriating lack of deference. "Look here, trainees," he bellowed, gesturing with a contemptuous flick of his hand. "This is what happens when you lose focus. You end up painting doors for a living. No discipline, no intensity, just beige." He was performing, using her as a prop in his lesson on martial superiority on the hierarchy of the world as he saw it. Her silence was, to him, an admission of inferiority. It was the silence of the unimportant, the background characters in the grand drama of his SEAL team. He failed to see the truth. He failed to see that her silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was filled with a discipline he couldn't comprehend, an intensity forged in pressures he had never known. Her hands, which he dismissed as soft, were the hands of a surgeon, practiced in tasks where a tremor of a single millimeter meant the difference between a clean success and a catastrophic failure. Her calm was not passivity. It was control, a mastery over self so complete that the loud, blustering world of men like Thorne simply ceased to register as a threat. The moment of reckoning arrived not with a bang, but with a panicked whisper over the comms. The day's primary exercise, a complex shipboarding simulation against a full-scale metal mock-up of a freighter hull, ground to a halt. A training device, a simulated limpet mine with a hyper-realistic timer and magnetic clamp, had malfunctioned. It was fused to the hull, its digital countdown frozen at 17 seconds, and the emergency release protocol was failing. It was a dead stick, inert, but its failure was critical. The multi-million-dollar exercise was paralyzed. The trainees of Trident Team 7 were stumped, and a team of flustered civilian engineers were talking in circles, suggesting brute force or a complete power down that would take hours. Thorne's face soured. His perfectly orchestrated theater of controlled chaos had descended into a genuine, embarrassing mess. From across the yard, the woman calmly placed her paintbrush across the top of the can. She wiped her hands on a clean rag, her movements unhurried, methodical. Each action was deliberate, a single note in a symphony of practiced efficiency. She began walking toward the source of the commotion, her soft-soled boots making no sound on the hot asphalt. She was moving into the center of the failure, a zone of rising panic, yet she carried with her an aura of absolute, unshakable peace. "Stay back, ma'am. This is a technical problem," Thorne barked, his authority already cracking under the strain of the failure. He saw her approach as an intrusion, Another civilian getting in the way. She didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the inert device, clinging to the steel hull. The trainees parted before her, a silent wave of confused respect for her sheer audacity. She knelt, her gaze tracing the seams of the device's casing. Her hands, the ones Thorne had mocked, hovered over the surface, not touching, but sensing. The engineers watched, bewildered. They had schematics, tablets, and diagnostic tools. She had only her eyes and an unnerving calm. She saw what they had missed, not a software glitch, but a physical flaw. A hairline stress fracture near the magnetic actuator housing, invisible to the untrained eye. She pointed. "There," she said, her first word of the day, quiet but clear. Then, she took the worn wooden handle of her own putty knife from her pocket. She didn't pry. She didn't scrape. She tapped. A specific point on the casing, once, twice, a third time. The taps were not forceful, but precise, rhythmic, a calculated application of vibration. A sharp click echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. The digital timer on the device went dark. The magnetic clamp released with a sigh of pneumatics. The mine slid from the hull into a trainee's waiting hands. The entire crisis, which had stumped a team of specialists, was over in 5 seconds. Thorne could only whisper, "That's not possible." Into that stunned silence walked Admiral Hayes. He moved with the quiet purpose of a man who owned every inch of the ground he stood on. He didn't look at the device, at the relieved trainees, or at the embarrassed engineers. He walked directly to the woman, who was already turning to go back to her painting. "Ma'am," he said, and the word landed like a thunderclap. "An admiral does not call a contract painter, ma'am." Chief Thorne snapped to attention, his face a canvas of confusion and dawning horror. The admiral gestured to her wrist, to the tattoo that was now clearly visible. It was a complex symbol, a trident, the mark of the Navy SEALs, piercing the center of a stylized sea mine. Beneath it, a set of coordinates. "I haven't seen that marker since Operation Resolute Trident." The admiral's voice was low, laced with a reverence that silenced the entire compound. It was the designation for the mission's lead EOD tech. The one they sent in alone, deep sea, when a foreign sub's reactor shield went critical off the Azores. The one they called the surgeon. He locked eyes with Thorne, a cold fire in his gaze. You assumed she was a painter because she was holding a paintbrush. You assumed she was weak because she was a woman. You assumed she was insignificant because she was silent. The admiral turned his address to the wide-eyed trainees of Trident Team 7, his voice becoming a tool of instruction, each word a carefully shaped lesson. "This," he said, gesturing not to the woman, but to the space she occupied, is Master Technician Eva Rostova. Her official title is Civilian Advisor to Naval Ordnance Development, but that title is a placeholder for a reality none of you have the clearance to read. The air grew thick with the weight of the reveal. The narrator's voice seems to take over, listing the unseen file. Unit designation: Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal, Deep Sea Special Operations. Combat déploiement classifique. Field specialty: Improvised nuclear and chemical device disablement. Medals and commendations: The Navy Cross for actions during a mission whose details will never be declassified. A Presidential Unit citation. 2 Bronze Stars with valor. She wasn't just a veteran. She was a legend, a ghost who walked out of the deepest, most dangerous waters where SEALs themselves were not qualified to go. She was on this base, incognito, personally observing the field trials of the very device she had helped design. Admiral Hayes turned back to Rostova. In front of Thorne, in front of the trainees, in front of the world, the 2-star admiral, a man who commanded fleets, raised his hand in a slow, perfect salute. It wasn't a gesture of protocol. It was an act of profound, personal respect. Eva Rostova simply gave a slight, acknowledging nod. The gesture was all the confirmation anyone needed. The story of the painter and the putty knife did not just spread, it detonated. It moved through the barracks like a shockwave, from the mess halls of Coronado to the secure forums of the Special Operations community. It became a legend, whispered with a mixture of awe and cautionary fear. It was called the surgeon's tap, or, more colloquially, getting painted, a new piece of institutional slang for being spectacularly humbled by an assumption. Chief Thorne did not try to hide or deflect. The next morning, he found Eva Rostova by the same barracks door, applying a second coat of beige with the same infuriating, magnificent calm. He stood a respectful distance away, waiting until she finished her stroke. There was no bluster left in him, no arrogance. He was hollowed out and ready to be refilled with a better lesson. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its usual bravado. "Thank you, it was not an apology, but an admission, a recognition." He then asked if she would be willing to speak to his trainees. Not about ordnance, but about focus, about seeing what is truly there, about the nature of silent professionalism. She paused her work, looked at him for the first time, and gave a single, clean nod. Her lesson was not a lecture. It was a demonstration. She didn't stand at a podium. She brought the trainees to the freshly painted wall. She taught them using the tools of her cover. She showed them how a perfect paint line requires a steady hand. Yes, but it first requires a calm mind. She showed them how preparing the surface, sanding, cleaning, priming, was more important than the final application of paint, just as preparation for a mission is more critical than the moment of action itself. She made them look at the door, not as a door, but as a system of components, each with a weakness, a strength, a point of tolerance. "Thorne teaches you to breach the door," she said, her voice soft yet carrying absolute authority. "I teach you to understand the door, to know the lock, the hinges, the frame, to know it so well that you don't need a battering ram. You only need a tap." The lesson was profound. It was about competence over brute force, intellect over aggression. Later, inside the EOD training facility, the humble putty knife was mounted inside a small glass case. It was placed not with the trophies of war, but with the tools of learning. The small brass plaque beneath it did not bear her name. It read, "The right tool is knowledge. The right touch is experience. The right assumption is no assumption at all." A year later, the culture at the Naval Special Warfare Center had subtly but profoundly shifted. The legend of the painter was now standard issue for every new class arriving at Coronado. It was the first story they heard, a parable delivered by Chief Thorne himself, whose instructional style was now transformed. He still demanded physical excellence, but he now championed intellectual rigor and situational humility with even greater fervor. He taught his SEALs to look for the quiet professional in the room, to respect the unassuming, to understand that the most dangerous person in a conflict is often the one nobody notices. The failure rate in the diagnostic and problem-solving phases of their training dropped by nearly 40%. Eva Rostova's unofficial lesson on understanding the door had been formalized into a training module that emphasized cognitive finesse. Her presence on the base became a living symbol of this new philosophy. She would still be seen, sometimes in her jumpsuit observing equipment trials, her silence a powerful reminder that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Her legacy wasn't in a single act of impossible skill. It was in the enduring change she inspired, a ripple effect of competence that made warriors not just stronger, but wiser. True legacy is never a static monument. It isn't a medal pinned to a uniform or a name carved in stone. It is a living principle, a standard of excellence that is passed on, refined, and carried forward by those who come after. Eva Rostova's legacy wasn't just in the deactivation of a single device. It was in the activation of a new mindset in a generation of elite warriors. It was in the quiet confidence she modeled, the idea that worth is proven through action, not assertion. It was in the respect she commanded without ever demanding it. The story serves as a permanent lesson that assumptions are the enemy of awareness, and ego is the enemy of expertise. The world is built, maintained, and protected not by the loudest voices in the room, but by the steady hands and calm minds of the quiet professionals, the surgeons and the painters, the ones who understand the intricate mechanics of reality and have no time for the theater of arrogance. They are the hidden architects of our safety, content to be judged only by the silent perfection of their work. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Hero Stories.